So I have a really awesome treat. A friend of mine let me borrow this incredible book, and it's huge, bro. Like, check it out. Massive. So let's read it while we got it. It's on loan. The Red Book by C.J. Young. The years of which I have spoken to you, when I pursued the inner images, were the most important time of my life. Everything else is to be derived from this. It began at that time, and the later details hardly matter anymore. My entire life consisted in elaborating what had burst forth from the unconscious and flooded me like an enigmatic stream and threatened to break me. That was the stuff and material for more than only one life. Everything later was merely the outer classification, the scientific elaboration, and the integration into life. But the numerous beginning, which contained everything, was then. C.J. Young, 1957. Preface. Since 1962, the existence of C.J. Young's Red Book has been widely known. Yet only with the present publication is it finally accessible to a broad public. Its genesis is described in Young's memories, dreams, reflections, and has been the subject of numerous discussions in the secondary literature. Hence, I will only briefly outline it here. The year 1913 was pivotal in Young's life. He began a self-experiment that became known as his, quote, confrontation, the subject of numerous confrontation with the unconscious. Let me repeat that. The year 1913 was pivotal in Young's life. He began a self-experiment that became known as his, quote, confrontation with the unconscious, end quote, and lasted until 1930. During this experiment, he developed a technique to, quote, get to the bottom of his inner process, end quote, quote, to translate the emotions into images, end quote, and to, quote, to grasp the fantasies which were stirring underground. He later called this method active imagination. He first recorded these fantasies in his black books. He then revised these texts, added reflections on them, and copied them into a calligraphic script into a book entitled Liber Novus, bound in red leather, accompanied by his own paintings. It has always been known as the Red Book. Young shared his inner experiences with his wife and close associates. In 1925, he gave a report of his professional and personal development in a series of seminars at the Psychological Club in Zurich, in which he also mentioned his method of active imagination. Beyond this, Young was guarded. His children, for example, were not informed about his self-experiment, and they did not notice anything unusual. Clearly, it would have been difficult for him to explain what was taking place. It was already a mark of favor if he allowed one of the children to watch him write or paint. Thus, for Young's descendants, the Red Book has always been surrounded by an aura of mystery. In 1930, Young ended his experiment and put the Red Book aside, unfinished. Although it had its honored place in his study, he let it rest for decades. Meanwhile, the insights he had gained through it directly informed his subsequent writings. In 1959, with the help of the old draft, he tried to complete the transcription of the text into the Red Book and to finish an incomplete painting. He also started on an epilogue, but for unknown reasons, both the calligraphic text and the epilogue break off in mid-sentence. Although Young actively considered publishing the Red Book, he never took the necessary steps. In 1916, he privately published the Septe Sermones ad Mortis, 7 Sermons to the Dead, a short work that arose out of his confrontation with the unconscious. Even his 1916 essay, The Transcendent Function, in which he described the techniques of active imagination, was not published until 1958. There are a number of reasons why he did not publish the Red Book. As he himself stated, it was unfinished. His growing interest in alchemy as a research topic distracted him. In hindsight, he described the detailed working out of his fantasies in the Red Book as a necessary but annoying, quote, aestheticizing elaboration, end quote. As late as 1957, he declared that the Black Books and the Red Book were autobiographical records that he did not want published in his collected works because they were not of a scholarly character. As a concession, he allowed Aniela Jaffe to quote excerpts from the Red Book and the Black Books in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, a possibility which she made little use of. In 1961, Young died. His literary estate became the property of his descendants, who formed the Society of Heirs of C.J. Young. The inheritance of Young's literary rights brought an obligation and challenge to his heirs to see through the publication of the German edition of the collected works. In his will, Young had expressed the wish that the Red Book and the Black Books should remain with his family, without, however, giving more detailed instructions. Since the Red Book was not meant to be published in the collected works, the Society of Heirs concluded that this was Young's final wish concerning the work, and that it was entirely a private matter. The Society of Heirs guarded Young's unpublished writings like treasure. No further publications were considered. The Red Book remains in Young's study for more than 20 years, entrusted to the care of Franz Young, who had taken over his father's house. In 1983, the Society of Heirs placed the Red Book in a safe deposit box, knowing that it was an irreplaceable document. In 1984, the newly appointed executive committee had 5 photographic duplicates made for family use. For the first time, Young's descendants now had the opportunity to take a close look at it. This careful handling had its benefits. The Red Book's well-preserved state is due, among other things, to the fact that it has only rarely been opened in decades. When, after 1990, the editing of the German collected works, a selection of works, was drawing to a conclusion, the executive committee decided to start looking through all the accessible unpublished materials with an eye to further publication. I took up this task because in 1994, the Society of Heirs had placed the responsibility for archival and additional questions on me. It turned out that there was an entire corpus of drafts and variant pertaining to the Red Book. From this, it emerged that the missing part of the calligraphic text existed as a draft, and there was a manuscript entitled Scrutinies, which continued where the drafts ended, containing the 7 sermons. Yet whether and how this substantial material could be published remained an open question. At first glance, the style and content appeared to have little in common with Young's other works, which was unclear. And by the mid-1990s, there was no one left who could have provided firsthand information on these points. However, since Jung's time, the history of this psychology had been gaining in importance and could now offer a new approach. While working on other projects, I had come in contact with Sonu Shamdasani in extensive talks. We discussed the possibility of further Jung's publications, both in general terms as well as with regard to the Red Book. The book had emerged within a specific content with which a reader at the turn of the 21st century is no longer familiar. But a historian of psychology would be able to present it to the modern reader as a historical document. With the help of primary sources, he could embed in it the cultural context of its genesis, situated it within the history of science, and relate it to Jung's life and works. In 1999, Sonu Shamdasani developed a publication proposal following these guiding principles. On the basis of this proposal, the Society of Heirs decided in spring of 2000, not without discussion, to release the Red Book for publication and to hand over the task of editing it to Sonu Shamdasani. I have been asked repeatedly why, after so many years, the Red Book is now being published. Some new understandings on our part played a major role. Jung himself did not, as it had seemed, consider the Red Book a secret. On several occasions, the text contained the address, "Dear Friends." It is, in other words, directed at an audience. Indeed, Jung let close friends have copies of transcriptions and discussed these with them. He did not categorically rule out publication. He simply left the issue unresolved. Moreover, Jung himself stated that he had gained the material for all his later works from his confrontation with the unconscious. As a record of this, the generation of Jung's grandchildren, as a record of this confrontation, the Red Book is thus, beyond the private sphere, central to Jung's works. This understanding allowed the generation of Jung's grandchildren to look at the situation in a new light. The decision-making process took time. Exemplary excerpts, concepts, and information helped them to deal more rationally with the emotionally charged matter. Finally, the Society of Heirs decided democratically that the Red Book could be published. It was a long journey from that decision to the present publication. The result is impressive. This edition would not have been possible without the cooperation of many people who developed their skills and energy to a common goal. On behalf of the descendants of C.J. Jung, I would like to express my sincere thanks to all the contributions. April 2009, Ulrich Hermi, Foundation of the Works of C.J. Jung. And so here it is. We'll do a little bit of, we'll skip the acknowledgements because it's a lot of names I don't know how to say. And we'll just take a look at this and continue on a little later because it's late here in Crestone, Colorado. Let's see. Let's take a peek, shall we? Wow. That's a language I don't understand. Wow. I wonder. Holy mackerel. Yeah, I just opened this for the first time. I mean, I perused it a couple of years back. Feels like a couple of years, but it was just a year ago. Let's see. Do we have an English translation? Beeps. Obviously somewhere. Let's find it. Wow. This is a journal. Jeez. Yep. That is beautiful. Dear God. Are you telling me the whole thing's... All right, guys. We're looking at pictures. Let's look at the pictures, because I don't speak this language. Thanks a lot, guys. So let's clear our minds. Let's take a look at some pictures, shall we? This is the subconscious of young. What's it moving you, yo? Wow. Get better lighting, Jeanette. Copy that. Okay. We'll continue with the visuals. And I'm glad I did this late because those are my friends. Put that aside. We'll look at this last one and then I'll get better lighting and come back another time soon with more visuals. See what it does for you. And good night for now.